standards and security and joint public safety cooperation between the police, accommodation providers and the Home Office to ensure that laws and rules are enforced. Mr. Speaker,
Cooper's asylum gamble, Labour's high-stakes immigration overhaul. Right. Before we dive into what might be the most controversial immigration shake-up since the Rwanda scheme, do us a favour and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, with the political storms brewing ahead, you'll want UK Connors in your corner for every twist and turn. Yvette Cooper has just thrown down the gauntlet in Parliament, and frankly, it's either political brilliance or career suicide. The Home Secretary's announced a complete overhaul of Britain's asylum system, and the centrepiece? Halting new applications for refugee family reunification. Yes, you heard that correctly. Labour, the party that spent years lambasting conservative immigration policy, has just pulled the plug on one of the most fundamental humanitarian aspects of asylum law. But here's where it gets properly interesting. Cooper's not just tinkering around the edges like some timid technocrat. She's promising the closure of every single asylum hotel by 2029, a complete overhaul of the appeals system. And get this, she's even floating changes to how we interpret the European Convention on Human Rights. Article 8, the right to family life, might be getting a very British makeover. The political theatre in the Commons was absolutely electric. Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, came out swinging harder than a pub brawler on New Year's Eve. His response was deliciously brutal. Anyone entering the UK illegally shouldn't be allowed to bring family members. Full stop. But Cooper's counterpunch was equally sharp, pointing out that small boat crossings have increased by 38% since last year, hardly a ringing endorsement of Conservative legacy. Now, let's talk numbers because they are genuinely staggering. Cooper claims Labour's already reduced hotel bills by nearly £1 billion and expelled 35,000 people who had no right to remain. That's not small change, that's serious governance. But here's the kicker. Over half of family reunion visas last year went to minors. Children. Cooper's essentially saying to desperate families, queue up with everyone else. No special treatment for your traumatized offspring. The SNP's Pete Wishart raised a fascinating point that should make every political strategist sit up and pay attention. He accused Cooper of handing Reform UK ammunition every time she adopts their rhetoric. It's a valid concern. When Labour starts sounding like Farage on immigration, what's left of the political spectrum? But Cooper's having none of it, insisting that praising Ukrainian mothers doesn't preclude having controlled borders. And speaking of Ukraine, here's where Cooper shows her political cunning. Ukrainian refugees get to keep their separate system. Convenient, isn't it? Easy to defend helping European war refugees while simultaneously pulling up the drawbridge for everyone else. It's politically astute but morally questionable. The Epping Forest controversy perfectly encapsulates Britain's immigration dilemma. The Bell Hotel has become a flashpoint, with thousands protesting outside. Dr. Neil Hudson, the local MP, described his constituency as being in distress with the situation being untenable. Cooper's response? We'll close it eventually, but in an ordered way. Political speak for not our immediate problem. But here's what's truly fascinating about Cooper's strategy. She's not just playing defense. She's going on the offensive against smuggling gangs. The new agreement with France allows direct deportation of small boat arrivals for the first time. It's a pilot scheme, but if it works, it could fundamentally change the game. The first returns are expected this month, and every political operative in Westminster will be watching those numbers like hawks. Liberal Democrat Lisa Smart raised perhaps the most uncomfortable question of the session. Over half of family reunion visas went to children last year. Cooper's essentially telling desperate parents their traumatized kids can wait indefinitely while bureaucrats redesign the system. It's harsh politics, but Cooper's gambling that voters prioritize border control over humanitarian concerns. The Conservative response was predictably savage. Philp highlighted that people crossing illegally have been charged with serious crimes, including sexual assault. It's inflammatory rhetoric, but politically effective. Cooper's counter that this proves a need for system reform rather than system abandonment shows genuine political skill. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because this story's far from over. What's particularly striking about Cooper's performance is her willingness to embrace unpopular decisions. Halting family reunification isn't vote-winning territory, but it demonstrates Labour's determination to own the immigration narrative rather than constantly defending it. She's essentially betting that voters will reward competent management over compassionate rhetoric. The technical details matter enormously here. Cooper's promising a complete overhaul of the appeals system, creating an independent body to handle asylum appeals. Currently, the appeals process is Labour's own admission, the biggest obstacle to reform. If they can streamline this bureaucratic nightmare, they might actually deliver on their promises rather than just talking about them. But let's address the elephant in the room. Cooper's floating changes to how we interpret Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. This is potentially explosive territory. She's suggesting interpretations of international law must reflect modern realities. Translation: we might need to get creative with human rights law to make this system work. It's legally complex and politically risky, but shows Labour's serious about substantive change rather than cosmetic adjustments. The local impact cannot be ignored. Rachel Maskell, the independent MP expelled from Labour, highlighted the dehumanizing and stigmatizing language around asylum seekers. She's worried about planned violent protests outside asylum hotels nationwide. Cooper acknowledged the dangers of divisive rhetoric while simultaneously implementing policies that might fuel exactly that division. It's a delicate balancing act that could easily backfire. The international dimension adds another layer of complexity. Cooper is praising Ukrainian mothers while simultaneously restricting family reunification for other nationalities. It's understandable given public sympathy for Ukrainian refugees, but creates uncomfortable hierarchies of victimhood. Some refugees are apparently more deserving than others, which sits uneasily with international humanitarian law. Graham Stringer, a Labour MP, raised perhaps the most fundamental challenge to Cooper's approach. The measures don't address pull factors drawing migrants to Britain rather than remaining in France. Until Britain becomes less attractive relative to other European destinations, demand will continue regardless of system reforms. Cooper's response about addressing illegal labor markets shows awareness of this challenge, but whether her solutions are sufficient remains unclear. The France agreement represents potentially the biggest game changer in Cooper's arsenal. Direct deportation of small boat arrivals could fundamentally alter the risk-reward calculation for migrants. But it's a pilot scheme, and pilots have a nasty habit of not scaling effectively. The devil will be in the implementation details, and early results this month will be crucial for public confidence. Make sure you're subscribed because we'll be tracking every deportation flight and policy announcement. Cooper's political positioning is genuinely masterful. She's simultaneously arguing for humanitarian concerns while implementing restrictionist policies. It's having your cake and eating it, politically speaking. She can point to Ukrainian support and Gazan sympathy while halting family reunification. It requires considerable rhetorical skill to maintain that balance without appearing hypocritical. The timing couldn't be more crucial. With Reform UK breathing down conservative necks and public concern about immigration reaching fever pitch, Labour need to demonstrate control. Cooper's gambling that tough measures now will create political space later. If small boat numbers decrease and hotel closures accelerate, Labour can claim victory. If they don't, this could become a political albatross. The appeals system overhaul deserves particular attention. Cooper's right that it's the biggest reform obstacle, but creating new independent bodies is expensive and time-consuming. The government's already funding thousands more court sitting days, but that's treating symptoms rather than causes. Success here requires fundamental structural change, not just resource increases. What's most striking about this entire debate is how Labour's essentially adopted conservative framing while promising better execution. They are not arguing for more generous immigration policy. They are arguing for more competent restrictive policy. It's politically safer but ideologically uncomfortable for many Labour supporters. The human cost remains largely unaddressed in Cooper's calculations. Families separated indefinitely while systems are overhauled, children unable to join refugee parents, vulnerable people warehouse and unsuitable accommodation. These aren't just policy details. They are human lives disrupted by political decisions. Cooper's promise to close every asylum hotel represents an enormous political hostage to fortune. If she succeeds, it's a massive political victory. If she fails, it becomes Labour's broken promise. The 2029 timeline gives her breathing space, but also creates years of potential criticism if progress stalls. The final irony in all this is how Cooper's channeling Margaret Thatcher's approach to policy implementation, tough, uncompromising, and willing to absorb short-term unpopularity for long-term strategic gain. It's not traditionally Labour territory, but it might be exactly what modern British politics demands. Cooper's asylum gamble represents Labour's most significant attempt to neutralise immigration as a political weapon against them. Whether it succeeds depends on delivery rather than rhetoric, results rather than promises. The next few months will determine whether this is political masterstroke or monumental miscalculation. If you want to stay ahead of every political twist, every policy announcement, and every scandal that's undoubtedly coming, make sure you're subscribed to UK Connors. This is just the beginning of what promises to be the most consequential immigration debate in a generation. Don't miss a moment of it.